Kami Cakes is a beta. That is a statement that, without any context, sounds extremely insulting, and immediately the Kami Cakes fan base will start to riot, throw torches and pitchforks in my general direction. But allow me to explain. There are strategies, there are tactics, there are playstyles that all players, whether they like it or not, whether they're conscious of it or not, play to. These are what we call their Wolfpack roles. There are 4 primary Wolfpack roles. There is Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Omega. Each of them have a different style of how they like to problem solve. This problem solving is an extension of how they play the game. It's an extension of their play style. So when I say that Kami Cakes is a beta, is a way for us to actually understand how he thinks and how he problem solves and what his play style is in order to better understand it, improve it, and beat it. Does that make sense? I sure hope so, because we're about to talk about it. Welcome back, Guardians, to another Dream Team video. I'm your humble host, Meesum777, and the Wolfpack strategy is a strategy that we use within the Dream Team to better understand, formulate, and essentially put a science to how we play a shooter game. It can really be applied to any game, but shooters is the very clear and obvious application that this strategy has. Don't get caught up on the name like I mentioned. These are just labels that we've given things. You could call them pineapple, orange, apple, and pizza. I don't know if you wanted to. It really doesn't matter. We've just decided to give it this alpha, beta, gamma, and omega thing, being that everything was something that is actually in a Wolfpack. The Wolfpack is a strategy that allows us to formulate and reduce what we call mind space when we're playing the video game. Mind space is the idea that, imagine if your brain were a computer, your brain can only process so much information at any given one period of time. To prove this to you, how many times have you gotten really focused on something, like you're in a really intense match, and your communication with your team is dropped to a minimal? That's because all of your CPUs, all of your mind space, is focused on trying to perform the tangible task at hand. You don't have the mind space in order to communicate. What the Wolfpack strategy allows us to do is it allows us to reduce the clutter and speed up the processing of that mind space. We have been using it for about 6 years, and every single player we've come up against has been something that we can understand and pick apart and dissect using this Wolfpack strategy, as well as allowing players who maybe aren't as good to get better from understanding Wolfpack strategy. Myself, I like to think I'm a pretty good player. I have far improved my game when I am able to focus down on whatever Wolfpack role I am playing at the given period of time. For example, let's take a look at this game that we're playing here. This was just a casual elimination game. I was in a 2-stack with my friend Pure Exalt, and we were just coming up against a 3-stack of players. We decided to peek their loadouts just to see what they were doing, and we discovered that they are all playing Alpha. Now, that was fantastic news for me at the time, because at that time, I was playing a very hard Gamma playstyle, which is a counter to Alpha playstyles. What ended up happening? We came up against them, we were on the Fortress, and we absolutely slaughtered them on the first 3 rounds. Slaughtered them so hard that they all rage quit all at once. They hit a brick wall. They couldn't get past my Gamma play. And of course, they were being a little aggressive, a little AP. Maybe they weren't playing the best. Maybe they're having an off day. Really, not really the point here. The point is that they were very hard countered by the playstyle that I was showing them. I was playing their direct antithesis to their game plan, to their strategy. What the Wolfpack roles allow us to understand is it allows us to understand where the strengths and weaknesses are of a given loadout and a given playstyle. Now, what is important to understand is that your weapons will heavily influence what role you play. However, it does not guarantee that you're going to play a certain role. For example, when I said that Kami Cakes is a beta, I decided to go look through some of his old gameplay footage. And by the way, to all the 4 content creators that I'm going to be pulling this footage from, I hope that it's okay that I'm using your stuff as long as I'm crediting you. But, please don't YouTube tomato me. Kami Cakes is playing a Mindbender's Ambition, and I believe that is an old-fashioned, it's a hand cannon. And that would be normally considered, and we're going to talk about what each role is in a second here, but I just want to make sure I get some of the context to this, right? This loadout would normally be considered an alpha loadout, an aggressive loadout. But the way that he uses it here, you can see how he's playing is very much let me wait and bait, is kind of the way you can see how he's playing this here. He's playing down walls, he's waiting for opponents to challenge him before he actually does anything. That's not a bad thing, it's just a good way to play for him, and that's the way that works for him. So despite him having a very alpha loadout, he's playing it very beta, alright? And another thing to note, good players can play whatever the hell they want and get away with it. What these primarily are focusing on is, like I mentioned, the way that you end up actually problem solving. So for example, if I'm taking myself in with a hand cannon and a shotgun, I might use that in a more gamma sense where I'm trying to shut stuff down in a defensive fashion, or I might push this more into the alpha role where I want to be right in people's faces and shutting stuff down aggressively. So let's talk about what each of these roles mean and how they can apply to you. So let's give the basics of each role. Alpha. Alpha is your initiation and your flanker. He's the type of player that will want to be in people's faces as much as he possibly can. He's constantly looking for aggro, and he's constantly trying to pull aggro. The Alpha is able to supply to his team the capability of pulling that aggro from the enemy team, allowing his team to actually get some free shots in. Alphas are proficient in being able to move and be aggressive in close range bursts. The typical loadout you'll see in Alpha is something like a shotgun and a hand cannon, or maybe like an SMG, stuff like that. Those close range, gotta get in your close personal space types of weapons. The way that Alphas are countered are by the Gamma loadout, the Gamma playstyle, like I mentioned earlier in our example. The Gamma playstyle is a playstyle which focuses heavily on defense, support, and general team management. They are the types of players that will play support type roles, healing, as well as being able to supply a lot of suppressive fire and shutting down aggression. They're good defensive options. You can see here from the True Vanguard footage that he's playing, despite him playing somewhat aggressively, he's constantly looking to shut down aggression rather than trying to create aggression of his own. That really lets you know what type of playstyle he has. Gammas are countered by Omegas. Omegas are the type of playstyle that like to sit in the back and wait for an opening shot. That doesn't mean that they're not aggressive, because they can be, as you see by Frostbolt's footage here. It just means that they prefer to take it at their own leisure. They would much rather take one good clean shot to flip a fight, rather than try to force something to happen in closer quarters. A really good Omega can be honestly terrifying, as you're seeing from Frostbolt's footage here. And by the way, if you guys have a difference of opinion of what you think each of their playstyles are, feel free to drop it in the comment section. I don't follow these YouTubers as much as I maybe would like just because of time constraints, so this was a more or less survey and first take on what I'm seeing here after looking at some of their footage. So obviously my data may not be the best for this, but anyway, let's roll on. So yes, the Omega is excellent at shutting down things. He provides to his team the ability to call out locations and generally keep an eye on what's happening with the enemy team. He does an excellent job of maintaining a backline and makes it very difficult for anything to challenge their team. They'll have a hard time if they've got themselves a good alpha player. So now we've come full circle. There's essentially a little triangle of counters that each of these playstyles have. Alphas countering Omegas, Omegas countering Gammas, and Gammas countering Alphas. Now you might have noticed, if you're observant, that one role was left out. The Beta role, the Kamikakes role. The Beta role is a very flexible role. It does an excellent job following up on an Alpha's aggression, and does a generally good job of handling 1v1s. All of its loadouts and playstyles are typically focused on being flexible and being able to handle any situation. Typically, the best players that we'll end up seeing, and in fact, I would argue almost every player is in some degree a beta player. Now, one thing to note is that this is how you prefer to play, right? Like I mentioned, I can play basically anything I want because I'm a pretty good player. Cammy can play anything he wants because he's a pretty good player. Frostbolt, True Vanguard, Aztecross, all these players can play whatever the hell they want because they're good players. But it really comes down to how they prefer to play the game. By understanding this, we're able to break down what we do right and what we do wrong within our role. If you ever are finding a teammate that just doesn't seem like he's doing a whole lot, examine what he's doing from a Wolfpack perspective. Is he playing too far back, Well, maybe he needs to learn that he's an Omega player and how he has to coordinate himself within the rest of the team. Is he way too far forward? More than likely that player is playing Alpha and is falling into the temptation and the trap of playing an Ape rather than playing an Alpha. Is your person just not with you enough times? They might be trying to handle too many one-on-ones, and they might be trying to play Gamma or Beta. This also allows us to formulate team strategies, tactics, pushes, pulls, defenses, etc. in a much cleaner fashion. I can say the word Alamo, and everybody who is in their role, they understand what they need to do right from the get-go. They can position themselves in ways that can give themselves the most benefit from their role, as well as benefiting the rest of the team. This comes back to our idea that we mentioned called mind space. I can say certain words, certain callouts, and everybody understands where they need to be without me needing to explain in depth what I'm looking for. Or somebody can say that to me. If somebody says to me, Meesum, you're hunter killer, I know exactly what they mean without them having to go into deep explanation as to why I'm way too far away from the rest of the team and they can't cover me. This is just going to be a pilot episode, and if you stuck around this long, I hope that you'll give us a subscribe so that you can see more of this type of stuff. As a small and still growing YouTube channel, it means a lot to us, and it gives us a lot of encouragement to keep going. In fact, most of you who are watching this probably aren't subscribed. More than 80% of you, generally by our statistics, show that you aren't. So if you could drop a subscription our way, that would be awesome. Thank you to the 4 primary YouTubers and content creators that I borrowed the footage from. I, of course, will credit you on the video itself as well as in the description. This will be the basics, and the next episode you guys can vote on down below. We're going to start talking about the roles. So drop it down in the comment section whether you would like to see Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Omega, as well as if you have any questions. We'll be more than happy to answer them there for you. Thank you so much for joining me on this video. Bless your faces, and deuces.